Good evening, folks. We're just going to give people a couple more minutes and then we'll begin. Okay, good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous et à toutes. Oh, I'll just let the screen do its thing here. So my name is Joelle Pastora Sala. I am Franco-Manitoban and Nicaraguan. I was born and raised and continue to live here in Treaty 1 territory. And I'm also a staff lawyer at the Public Interest Law Center. I, along with Paula Ethans, will be facilitating the webinar today. Paula is a lawyer and independent contractor who agreed to assist Pilk with our community engagement. As we begin, it's important to acknowledge that Pilk and the organizing team behind, as well as many of you joining us today, are located and working from Treaty 1 territory on the lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We also want to acknowledge that Shoal Lake in Treaty 3 territory supplies the water for us here in Winnipeg. Pilk staff are grateful to be here and to be actively working towards the respect of Indigenous laws as equal and distinct to Euro-Canadian laws as an integral part of our reconciliation journey. Un gros merci de vous joindre à nous ce soir. Nous sommes énormément reconnaissants de votre présence. On vous remercie de partager avec nous votre temps, vos connaissances et vos expériences. I see so many familiar faces here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy day to share your insights with us, and we are so pleased that over 85 community organizations, individuals, and perspectives have agreed to take part in one of two webinars. At this point, I have a few technical notes. To begin, I'd like to ask everyone to mute themselves so as to not have any background noise for others. As you can see at the bottom, oh, I don't have the closed captioning yet, actually. I should have closed captioning at the bottom of my screen. I'm just gonna ask Paula, oh, it is going. Can you all see the closed captioning?
It's called live transcript.
You need to click at the bottom where it says live transcript, I'm being told, where it says CC live transcript, if you would like the closed captioning. Thank you for that. Closed captions will only be available for one breakout room. So if you haven't already done so, please do not hesitate to message Paula to request the breakout room which has closed captions. Lastly, this webinar, except for the breakout rooms, is being recorded. We invite you to keep your camera on throughout the evening, except of course if you do not feel comfortable in doing so. We are conducting the webinar today for 4 main reasons. First, to share information about the types of systemic, law reform, and administrative advocacy services offered by PILC of LAM, by the Public Interest Law Centre of Legal Aid Manitoba, which I will refer to as PILC of LAM. Second, to hear about your legal needs relating to systemic and group issues. Third, to discuss your access to justice barriers relating to systemic and group issues. And fourth, to identify what, if any, possible supports can be offered by the Public Interest Law Centre of Legal Aid Manitoba. By way of an agenda for this evening, once Paula goes over some very brief ground rules, we will hear from 4 speakers who will be providing background information about the Public Interest Law Centre. Once we have heard from our speakers, we will be dividing into smaller breakout rooms to answer 3 main questions. First, about your systemic legal needs, second, about your barriers to access to justice, and then how we can help. We'll then come back to all together to debrief, and then we'll all be on our way. Paula.
Thanks, Joelle. So we just have a few brief ground rules for engagement this evening. So we're going to ask of you to, 1, participate actively and allow for the active participation of others. Second, to express your views and opinions respectfully and respect the views and opinions of others. Third is to work with your facilitator within the limits of time and technology. And lastly is to ensure there's always 1 speaker and many listeners.
Thank you, Paula. So today we have 4 speakers who are briefly going to be sharing the work done at the Public Interest Law Centre of Legal Aid Manitoba. First, we will hear from Peter Kingsley, who is the Executive Director of Legal Aid Manitoba. Second, we will hear from Darcia Semps, who is a representative of the Pilk Advisory Committee. Third, we will hear from Byron Williams, the Director of Pilk. Fourth, we have Jennifer Unger, a Pilk advocate from the Pilk the Pilk Advocacy Unit. During the presentations, we'll have a poll questions that pop up that you can respond to, so keep an eye out for those. Peter.
Thank you very much, Joelle. So, as Joelle said, my name is Peter Kingsley. I am the Executive Director of Legal Aid Manitoba. And I'm just going to share my screen, if I've got this right. I think I do. So on behalf of Legal Aid Manitoba, I would like to welcome you to the Public Interest Law Centre's engagement webinar. The process you will be taking part in will assist PILC to build upon 4 decades of advocacy, advancing access to justice, substantive equality, reconciliation, environmental protection, and sustainability in Manitoba. And of course, my slide is not proceeding. There we go. Legal Aid Manitoba, or LAM, was created by an act of the Provincial Legislature in 1971 and opened its doors to clients in 1972. LAM was created to be an independent statutory corporation with a mandate to provide representation to financially eligible Manitobans who could not otherwise afford the cost of counsel to defend themselves in criminal or child protection matters or to address family law issues. However, in the first decade of the program, it became apparent that while LAM could assist individuals, there was a significant gap in addressing systemic barriers to justice. The individual case-by-case method occasionally created a chance for real change, but the criminal justice system did not always lend itself to the broader questions. Furthermore, many Manitobans, and especially those directly impacted by these barriers, did not have the means to tackle these large issues on their own. While council may have been willing to take on the occasional matter, it was at best a haphazard system. I think we're going to have the first of the pop-up questions. I think. There we go. From this identified gap in access to justice and the opportunity presented by the creation of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982, the Public Interest Law Centre was born. LAM's legislation was changed to allow group representation as well as individual. Since Arnie Peltz assumed the role of the first director of PILC, the effect of the office has been huge. Laws have changed, policies rewritten, and funding decisions altered. In many cases, some of the beneficiaries of the decisions may not have even been aware of the work done by PILC on their behalf. We only have to look at the recent decision by MPI to provide refunds to policyholders as an example of their work, although many Manitobans had no idea that PILC was involved. Their work is as necessary now as it was in 1982. While staff and private bar lawyers continue to advance LAM's mandate to serve eligible low-income Manitobans in individual matters in criminal, family, child protection, immigration, and refugee law, PILC, using a mixture of staff and private lawyers, bring attention to accessibility, consumer, human rights and equality, Indigenous and environmental issues affecting broad swaths of the Manitoba population. You have been provided with PILC's impact report outlining this work, the work this office has done in the past. We are now looking for assistance in determining how PILC will continue its work over the coming years. The need to challenge governments and other organizations to do better, to be more inclusive, to recognize the important needs of each community and organization like yours to grow. Your ideas and plans will assist PILC and the senior management team of LAM to determine how best to serve Manitobans. I thank you for your gift of time to this difficult task and for helping us to make Manitoba better for everyone. Merci, miigwech, and ikosi.
Thank you, Peter. Darcia. And we will ask the tech folks to pull up the next PowerPoint, please.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say hello to all of you who are participating on this webinar presentation. It's my pleasure to be here. I work currently as General Counsel and the Director of Policy and Ethics at the Law Society of Manitoba. And I'm here as a representative of PILC's Advisory Committee to tell you a little bit about that committee and about the work of PILC generally. The Advisory Committee to PILC was actually created just over 2 years ago in December of 2018. And it's been my privilege and my pleasure really to sit as part of that committee and assist in the work of PILC in that capacity. There are really 3 objectives of the PILC Advisory Committee. We could go to the next slide. Number 1, we provide advice to the Executive Director of PILC on matters relating to issues of public interest. Number 2, we provide advice to the executive director of PILC on the ongoing portfolio of PILC, consistent with PILC's mandate to represent eligible groups and individuals in cases that will have broad impact on the interpretation or application of the law and will affect groups of people. Number 3, we are also expected to study and make recommendations to Management Council of Legal Aid on any matter related to issues of public interest that may be referred to us by Legal Aid Counsel. One of the responsibilities of the PILC Advisory Committee is to provide advice to the executive director on case selection. When new matters come to the attention of the executive director, PILC then assesses those matters and they conduct really an intake process based on what they've determined should be their case selection criteria. And that selection criteria is as follows. Number 1, there are sufficient resources within PILC and funding available to pursue the matter throughout the proceedings. Number 2, there is legal merit to the legal issue or case. Number 3, the matter must impact a systemic issue in the law, and the facts of the particular case make it suitable as a test case on that issue, and or the issue must impact a discernible group, a segment, if you will, of the population in Manitoba. And finally, there must be a reasonable likelihood of success. I think now is time for the pop-up question. Have you or your organization ever accessed PILC resources? Looking at that split, it's almost even, 52% yes and 48% no. So it seems like this is a wonderful way to have an evening like this to explain to half of you who are on this call. I understand there's more than 30 of you on the call. A great way to tell you more about PILC itself. I referred to the case selection process a moment ago. So practically speaking, there are actually 6 steps to that case selection process. First step is basic intake. Community organizations, existing clients, sometimes other lawyers, and then new clients will contact the PILC offices about their legal issue. The next step happens when there's a preliminary screening that's done of the matter by a student or a supervisor or a lawyer at PILC, at which time the following questions are asked. A, should a referral be made elsewhere? Or is it a matter worthy of investigation? The third step is when an opinion is formed and a recommendation made by PILC staff. As part of that process, the case selection criteria is applied to the issue, and other factors may also be considered, such as what would be the strategic impact of taking on that matter? How does it relate to the current portfolio mix? And lastly, is this a matter that would assist with staff development and help to improve staff's expertise in handling these various issues? The fourth step is when the matter is considered at a PILC staff case selection meeting. If there are questions flowing from the staff meeting and there is an upcoming advisory committee meeting, then the issue is brought to the advisory committee for its consideration and input. The fifth step is when a meeting is held where the executive director of Legal Aid Manitoba and the executive director of PILC and a staff lawyer all meet, and a presentation is made relating to recommended new cases. The next step is the executive director of Legal Aid Manitoba makes a decision about whether to take on those recommended cases or not. And as a last step, you should know that if the answer is no, there is a right to appeal that decision. In the past, PILC has brought cases forward to the advisory committee for advice and assistance in making recommendations. Based on our varied experiences, we also help set certain strategic priority areas of focus for PILC. And the next slide, please. As part of our terms of reference, the PILC staff will organize a biennial community consultation, so once every couple of years, and report back to the advisory council about community needs and priorities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Darcia. Byron. And again, I would invite the tech folks to pull up the next PowerPoint, please.
And it's Byron here. Hopefully you can hear me. It's rare that I have to be told to unmute myself, but I think I've taken that big step. Bonjour, good evening. I'm the director of the Public Interest Law Center, and we're a proud office of Legal Aid Manitoba. And I really want to thank you for taking part in this engagement. If we can go to slide 2 about who we serve. Our mission is to work with our community partners to make systemic change, to address barriers to inclusion and to sustainability created by unfair actions, policies, and laws. Our clients are typically public interest groups, individuals with protected characteristics, persons with low income, and nations. And sometimes they come to us with a pure legal question. More often, they come to us with a public policy question and say, do you have any bright ideas on how we can help? When there are potential legal solutions consistent with our mandate under the Legal Aid Act, we assist our clients by offering high quality, nonpartisan, and evidence-based services. When we talk about our services, it's not just about going to court, although we do a lot of that and like it. A successful public interest campaign tends to be a mixture of pure legal tools combined with research, public education, media and social media efforts, as well as respectful but direct, in-your-face engagement with government or large monopolies. For us, successful outcomes come from partnerships. Our whole model is about working with experts, with elders, with academics, and with our private sector pro bono legal partners. Above all, we rely on the insight of our clients, their lived personal or organizational experience. Our primary areas of focus at this time are human rights and constitutional law, environmental law, consumer rights, and laws relating to Indigenous people. And I'll ask the great folks at the U of W to bring up our pop-up question. How can the Public Interest Law Center better support and serve you and your community? And I'll note that we'll have more of a chance to go through this in the webinar. Looks like we have a lot of work coming up for us. All of the above wins. If we can go to slide 3 about the Public Interest Law Center's impact. And I'd like to highlight the fact that our clients have been able to do a lot to achieve change, both locally and at the national level, with the assistance of our legal team under our Legal Aid Manitoba mandate. And one case from May of 2020 is the Stadler decision. and it is one of the key Canadian decisions over the past decade about social benefits and the Charter. In that case, our Manitoba Court of Appeal found that persons with disabilities in receipt of social assistance no longer can be forced to apply early for their Canada Pension Plan pension benefits, no longer can be forced to live in perpetual poverty by reducing their CPP benefits. Another significant outcome for our clients in 2020 was the assisted reproduction case, where the Court of Queen's Bench said that the definition of parent under the Family Maintenance Act discriminated against LGBTQ parents. Still in 2020, it was a good year for our clients, was the Sumner Pruden matter, where a human rights adjudicator found that Manitoba's delays, denials, and disruptions of service to a First Nation mother and her child with disabilities was discriminatory. And if you cast your minds back just a couple of years, in 2018, Manitobans were shocked when Manitoba Hydro sought a 7.9% rate increase. In a Public Utilities Board decision from that year, the PUB said no to 7.9% and saved Manitobans more than $60 million annually by imposing still a significant increase of 3.6%, but not at those rate shock levels. If we can go to slide 4, these are some other important outcomes for our clients, and time does not permit me to go through them in detail, but I just want to highlight the fact that in partnership with community, we seek systemic change. And this slide highlights the work our clients have done on issues relating to major environmental matters, like Manitoba Hydro mega projects, on matters like improving access to the medical profession for internationally trained medical graduates to use their great skills to enhance services for Manitobans, on issues relating to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and recommendations about putting families first, and about moving persons with intellectual disabilities out of large institutions and back to the community where they belong. Again, I just want to say, as we move to slide 5, thank you so much. We're so excited about the opportunity to listen for the bulk of this evening. And I want to note that in addition to the systemic successes of our clients, we also have at the Public Interest Law Center an administrative advocacy unit, which assists as individuals who are financially eligible. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Jennifer Unger, to talk about that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Unger, and as Byron had indicated, I am an administrative law advocate with Legal Aid. So what is an administrative law advocate? Really, I describe myself as a paralegal. We work under the supervision of the lawyers at Pilk, and currently there are 4 advocates in our unit. We provide coverage to Manitobans in the areas of government benefits, such as employment and income assistance and community living disability services. We also provide coverage under residential tenancies matters and also representation on refugee matters as well. In our unit, we provide 2 separate types of services to Manitobans. Our first area of service is what I would call our guidance and information service. So this is when there is no formal representation required on behalf of an individual. Rather, some examples would be when a person is going to be self-representing themselves at a board under our areas of coverage, we might be able to give them some tips on how to prepare their case and what to expect at that hearing process. Another example of our information service would be an information for a recipient of employment and income assistance who perhaps receives a financial gift and they want to know whether or not they have to report that gift. So these are the types of questions that we get on a daily basis through our informal calls. And it's a pretty high volume role for our 4 advocates. It keeps us busy all the time. And we also have our second role, which is formal advocacy and representation. And that would mean a person or an individual has qualified for legal aid. So they've met the test of merit on their case and also the financial eligibility. We commonly represent individuals before the administrative boards of the Social Services Appeal Board, the Residential Tenancies Branch, and also the Residential Tenancies Appeal Commission. Our formal representation, for some examples, would look at representing a tenant who is potentially facing eviction or an eviction proceeding at the Residential Tenancies Branch. We would also look at assisting an individual who is enrolled in employment and income assistance, but they've been denied enrollment into that program's disability category. So we may look to assist them during their appeal to the Social Services Appeal Board. I'm going to ask if our pop-up question could appear at this time. So our pop-up question is, do you or your clients require assistance with employment and income assistance, which is commonly called welfare, the Community Living Disability Services Program, refugee representation, none of the above, or all of the above? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm kind of surprised by this different split, but all of the above, again, is coming in pretty high. So that's wonderful. Another type of program where we provide assistance to Manitobans is called the Community Living Disability Services Program. So the Community or CLDS program is a program where it offers assistance to adults in Manitoba who have an intellectual disability. When individuals are denied enrollment services, they may seek our unit's assistance to represent them at the Social Services Appeal Board to present their case for an appeal. The newest area of coverage for our unit is providing assistance for refugee representation. A licensed advocate will provide services for assisting with preparing the basis of claim forms, representation at refugee claim hearings, also pre-removal risk assessments, and humanitarian and compassionate applications. And finally, our work in the advocacy unit of PILC, we have been successful with assisting in preventing numerous evictions. We also assist in winning financial compensation for our tenants. We've succeeded in having income assistance benefits granted, reinstated, and as well enrollment into the disability category. And also we have been successful in enrollment services into the CLDS program. So I'd like to thank everyone for your time, and I hope everyone enjoys their evening. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much to all of our speakers and for sharing the incredible work that Pilk and Lam are doing right now. We are going to take a very short break. It's going to be a 4 or 5 minute break, very tight. We run a tight ship here, I know that's exact, but we'll give everyone a few minutes to stretch their legs or grab some coffee, and we'll see you all back here no later than 6:10, please.
Okay. You are now unmuted.
Hi, Jackie. It's nice to see you. It's Byron.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Really glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you.
All right, hi everyone. I wasn't lying when I said we're running a tight ship tonight. It's 6:10, so we're going to resume, and I hope everyone had a good break, stretched their legs. Now we're going to go into our breakout rooms for some smaller discussions. Our tech team is going to be randomly placing everyone in these breakout rooms. There will be approximately 7 to 9 participants in each room, plus 1 facilitator and 1 note taker. These rooms are going to last for approximately 45 minutes before we all come together in this main room to debrief and share our discussions. So if anyone needs closed captioning, feel free just to send a message to the University of Winnipeg folks in the chat, and they can organize that from you.
Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, do you know how to join rooms?
I was actually just sending you a text because I didn't want to do the big broadcast thing. If I click join,
if you go on your screen, you
I've
should
got-
have, and you can just join and then just leave breakout room, you'll come back here and then you would just join the next room.
that was the question. I just didn't want to get locked into one.
Where are
Perfect.
you going first?
I was going to do them in numerical order.
Okay, I'll go opposite. I'll go 4 first then.
All right, sounds good.
Joelle, if you need to get a hold of me, just come back to the main room.
just in order of 1, 2, 3, 4 breakout rooms. So I believe the first breakout room was facilitated by Max. So Max, are you able to pull up your document and then have your recorder report?
Yes, I'll pull up my document here, and Alif bravely volunteered to share for our group, and it looks like he's bravely volunteered to share first. So thank you very much, Alif.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening again. So our first question was, what are your community's biggest and legal or public needs, policy needs? So I was the first speaker, and I talked about breaking the ice, because this is the first, I came here in Winnipeg in 2014, and this is the first time I'm hearing about Pilk. So this is such a good organization, and this is going to be a huge help for the immigrant community in Winnipeg. So if we can introduce this community via social media, or maybe new student orientation or something like that, that will help a lot, because our perception of legal system and putting connecting the dot is different. So that's first thing. Then in our group, Jacqueline talked about tiny houses in Vancouver. So yeah, First Nation communities are facing housing crisis. So we need to fix them, but we also need to think about the future, like how we can make the houses more energy efficient, how we can think about sustainability, how we can think about what will happen after 20 years, because climate change is real. And because my thesis is on housing crisis in northern Manitoba, so I also want to focus on using local materials, because in a fly-in community, it takes $7,000 to $10,000 to bring a 1 container of lumber there. So if we can use the local forest there, it's gonna not only save the money, it will also open up the opportunity whole year around, because the winter road window is between 2 to 3 months. So that's second point. And then Dr. Charlie Thompson talked about food security and its reality in the COVID era. So in her research, it came out in two First Nation communities in North Island Lake have almost 100% food insecurity. So and then because of the overcrowding and lack of housing and other stuff, the COVID risk is increasing day by day. So this is something we need to look at. And so basically, if I summarize her comment, is we need to look at the reality of long colonial state policies. And our next speaker was Amanda. She talked about Jordan Principle. So we all know what is Jordan Principle and how it works. So the First Nation people have a conversation with Fed and federal government, provincial government on health sector. So in future, PILC need to step up and stand with those First Nation communities, so that they can have a proper negotiation with the government and other parties with whom they are dealing with. And our last speaker was Robin, and she talked about the inequalities Black people face in the society. So people who have color have less access to equal opportunity, and she's concerned about the immigration from Caribbean areas. So that's the end of first question from our group. The second question was, what access to justice barrier do you and your community normally encounter? So our first speaker was Jacqueline, and she mentioned that figuring out where to go, whom to talk to, is a main concern for her community, because obviously Canada has federal government, provincial government, then municipal government. So who's responsible for what, and who can provide you the better support? If not, then how they can direct you to the proper channel is a big question for her community. Then Robin was our second speaker, and she also talked about the same thing, like not knowing where to go, and the discrimination in the system. And she also mentioned that the length of time to get to a resolution. So sometimes people lose their interest. And if you look at the marginalized community, like for example, First Nation communities or marginalized people in Manitoba, they don't have the resources or have the opportunity to stick with this thing and wait until they get the resolution. So at some point they lose their hope and they just give up. And then our next speaker was Dr. Shirley Thompson. She talked about awareness, funding, delays. And as an example, she talked about the Lake St. Martin and Little Saskatchewan. They suffered 8 years to get a resolution, and it was like they displaced from their reserve land because of the dam the government built. But it takes 8 years for them to get the resolution, and even whatever they get is not adequate. So addressing that is important. Then our another speaker was Amanda. She talked about lack of resources. Like most of the time the resources are not there, and if there, people doesn't understand how to use that. So that's the problem. And lastly, I talked about for immigrant community. I'm an immigrant. I came here in 2014. So I talked about Provincial Nominee program and how it is exploited by the employers in Manitoba. So if you know that a Provincial Nominee program is a specialized stream to bring skilled worker in Manitoba. So what happened, like you have to work for full-time as 6 months, and then you are eligible to apply. And once you apply, you have to stick with that job until you get your result. Sometimes it takes more than 1 year or 1.5 years to get a result. So in this time, what happened, like you are prone to exploitation because your own owner or your employer knows that you can't leave the job because the immigration people, the CIC people are gonna call to him, ask for the employment status and everything. And sometimes it's also hard for people to get another job when they are new here. For example, like lack of references, lack of experiences. So these are the things. So this is something I think a lot of immigrant people, a lot of immigrant people are facing. And if Pilk can look at it, that would be nice. So this concludes our second questions. And then we have the question number 3.
Elif, sorry, Elif, can I just briefly interrupt? For the third question, just so that we can hear from everyone, are you able to just summarize like 1 or 2 points?
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
So basically, so maybe more workshop and conference on policy issues. Then and then maybe work collaboratively with Pilk, because Dr. Thompson did her research on so many First Nation issues, and if she can incorporate that with Pilk, for example, like her documentary on Little Sask and St. Martin are using in a court case right now. So she can use her graduate student to work on those things. And if she can work with Pilk, that would be helpful for the whole society. Thanks so much. And sorry to take too long.
Thank you so much. I see folks clapping for you, so we really appreciate that that summary. Next, I'm going to call on breakout room number 2, and I'll just ask Max to stop sharing screen so that I can figure out who was my facilitator. That was Chris. So I'll call on Chris to pull up his share screen, and I'll just ask the next reporter to take approximately 5 minutes to report on the 3 questions. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Sorry about that. I'll be sharing on behalf of Group 2, and thanks to everyone who joined Group 2. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I think it was informative and fruitful. I'll do my best here to be brief. In response to question 1, we heard a lot in Group 2 about a wide variety of issues related to access to government benefits through government benefit programs. EIA was certainly one that was discussed with some degree of prominence, but it wasn't the only one raised. And under that umbrella, recipients need to know their rights regarding entitlement to benefits, and they also need to be informed about and supported in navigating the system, including in appeal processes. And we also received some really helpful and interesting comments about a lack of public knowledge related to rights and circumstances which involve law enforcement. We all know that sometimes calling the police is a default response in a variety of situations, but it's not always the most helpful. And so awareness of alternative options or awareness of what the possible outcomes of involving law enforcement might be was identified as a gap in public knowledge. In response to question 2, we received a lot of comment about how barriers to information is a barrier to access to justice, or barrier to information is a barrier to justice. And one example of this was access to information or incident reports following incidents in healthcare facilities. And also related to our discussion about law enforcement, it's apparently very difficult to access law enforcement disciplinary records, which makes it very difficult to identify trends in behavior or to view anything as anything other than a one-off incident. We also heard a lot about limited access to representation for refugee claimants. There are, in limited circumstances, we understand legal aid certificates available to refugee claimants, but in many cases we heard in group 2 that those certificates will often only lead to representation in a hearing, but not with preparation of the complaint. And that's a significant gap for refugee claimants. And we also received discussion about the imbalance of power between consumers or folks who will be impacted by regulatory decisions and project proponents or regulated utilities in regulatory or environmental licensing proceedings. And that imbalance of power is often related to an imbalance in the availability of resources, which for consumers often bars access to expertise. And lastly, not unsurprisingly, based on what I've said already, PILC can do better to serve our communities by providing legal education related to information about rights, information about alternatives to involving law enforcement, and information about what PILC can offer. So not just information about legal rights of members of the community, but also more information about how we can be involved and how we can support. So that's a helpful comment for us. There was a significant need identified for research support to advocacy organizations. And again, PILC can better serve our community by working toward increased and improved access to representation for refugee claimants. Group 2, I hope I represented your comments well, and thanks again for your contributions.
Thanks, Chris. I see people clapping for you too, so it looks like you did a good job. And now I'm going to call on Breakout Room 3, which is Paula. And same thing for your rep, so about 5 minutes, please.
Okay, well, I agreed to report at the end of the session, so I wasn't really preparing myself, so bear with me. I'll try to do justice to what we talked about. We had a really great discussion. I really appreciated my fellow panelists' input. There's quite a bit of overlap with what the other groups talked about, a lot about accessibility, about people knowing, knowing what their legal rights are, but also knowing about PILC services, and about ways that outreach could reach the right people, immigrant and refugee communities, people for whom English isn't a first language, people with intellectual disabilities, people with hearing impaired, and so on. So, when we talked about question 1, what the community's biggest legal or public policy needs, we talked a lot about the environment and the sort of intersecting issues of environmental harms and First Nation communities, especially with respect to Manitoba Hydro. biggest legal or public policy needs. So yeah, we talked, you can see listed a number of the, it's much of it is Manitoba Hydro harms to land and waters, and they're about to issue a final license that we're afraid will sort of cement in place some of the most damaging aspects of Manitoba Hydro, like the augmented flow program. We talked about gender equality and family rights as well, an area where there have been some important successes. And we talked about access to the workplace that actually in some ways has been better under COVID because of, or was that in the general group? Anyway. Okay, so question 2, access to justice barriers. Well, again, I think there's a lot of overlap with what other groups said. I think Indigenous communities in Manitoba face a long list of barriers, physical barriers in terms of distance. They're far from Winnipeg and travel's incredibly expensive. The financial barriers, but the biggest thing is that their biggest problem is government, which systemically violates their rights and has systems and structures in place that violate their rights, and that things like Manitoba Hydro, in particular, but also other harms they experience are done to benefit the rest of the population, and so it's harder to fight that because people are benefiting from Manitoba Hydro and from cheap rates. And to fight the government, you have to take on a massive court challenge. It's not just going to the Human Rights Commission or the tenancy board or something. And then the other communities have. Well, I think you all know that these issues about accessing the system. Okay. Question 3, how can PILC better serve you and your community? So we've first talked about the need to expand the funding for PILC, that it needs to be able to do more, it needs more staff, and that it would be beneficial. And we want to make sure that whoever is receiving this report gets that message loud and clear. So we agreed unanimously that PILC needs better funding. And we also talked about the possibility of a court challenges program, for First Nations is what we're thinking, so that they can take treaty rights violations to court. Their treaty rights are just violated on a massive scale via Manitoba Hydro, for instance. Then we talked about offering the services in plain language and so on, but also informing people about services. So we talked about PILC going to, for instance, food banks and informing the people there proactively about the availability of PILC services. So people might even find out about it before they need it, and that would be an accessibility issue too. Better web presence. I guess PILC's website's pretty hidden. We talked about the need to hire Indigenous lawyers so that you have ongoing, information on Indigenous issues, Indigenous law, what's going on in the communities, community needs, and so on. And we talked about a paid mentorship program that would be for Indigenous communities, but also the disability community. We talked about several other communities. I'm blanking right now which ones they were, but a paid mentorship so that you could connect with youth from these communities and help build their capacity, and at the same time PILC would get better information about their communities.
Thank you so much, Jarvis. And just for those wondering, we did not pay Jarvis to say that PILC should have more funding. Byron, or can I ask you to share your screen as the 4th breakout room, and I'll ask Gloria, who's sharing on their behalf, to again be approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi.
Over to Gloria. Good luck.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm dealing with my bad writing here, so I'll do my very best. How many minutes do I have?
For 4.5. Can you see
4.5.
this? Can you see the screen? Because there's notes on the screen as well.
Ah, okay, that's great. Yes, I can see the screen instead of using my own notes. Would you like me to just kind of go through these?
Sure, yeah, just a summary would be great.
Okay, sure. So what are your community's biggest legal or public policy needs? Accessibility standards for residential homes, housing for families with low income and persons living with disabilities, environmental information and advocacy resources, strategic planning and for the environment, policing in Manitoba, legislation, research, litigation, getting people to listen and referral, especially where mental health is an issue, and that's all in the area of policing, access to basic needs, electricity, heat, housing, privacy issues, technology and otherwise, Bill C-64 and impacts of education reform on families with disabilities, and issues regarding First Nation laws and environmental sustainability. Thanks, Byron. So question 2, what access to justice barriers do you and your community normally encounter? Physical barriers, communication barriers, and a barrier simply to access services. Resources to pay for legal services. What can be done? Who do we approach? Problem solving advice, research capacity to do the research within an organization. Justice that's not fair to First Nations, overrepresentation and discriminatory practices, geography and distance barriers, especially for Northern First Nations, and an absence of information in a timely manner. Excuse me for 1 second. A need for affordable advocacy services, more resourcing and staffing. Government police officials just won't listen. Challenges with bias in LIRA. Efforts to delegitimize voice of concerned community groups, which deters their ability to help others. Public education about how to have a voice and how to know what your rights are and assert your rights. Hard to solve problems, need financial resources to challenge big pocketed business and government, need time, and a lack of information that there is a problem. And also the overlapping jurisdictions for one decision to be made. In the disability community, #1 barrier is into justice is funding and money, people on income assistance, limits on legal aid, CLDS, and finally, legal aid guidelines do not accommodate disability. The third question, how can PILC better serve you and your community? Train young people to be good advocates in both Indigenous and Western legal traditions. Information about available resources at PILC. Helping to challenge inadequate and deficient accessibility legislation. Directly connecting with certain community agencies, advocacy for prisoners as an example. Glad you reports, enhance capacity and protect rights. Sentences don't necessarily follow prison advocacy. I'm not sure exactly, Byron, what that comment means, but I'll let you resolve that. Oh, sentences don't follow us in life. Thank you very much. And prison advocacy. Policing in Manitoba, public education, legislation, research, litigation, getting people to listen and referral, funding and navigating the system, especially where mental health is an issue. Maintain a consumer voice, more funding for PILC to extend capacity or expand capacity, I should say. Offering, they're already offering the right services. PILC is already offering the right services, but they need more capacity to do more. More capacity building for other organizations. Education, access to information for families with disabilities, more information about PILC itself, continued advocacy on disability issues, traveling across silos. That was a thing that came out. Training, advocacy, education, and help to find hidden information and start building cases. Thank you, Byron, for those notes. Much more concise and straightforward than mine were, so I appreciate that. I don't think I had anything you didn't have, so I hope we did represent everyone's concerns in the group. Thanks for letting me be part of that group. I learned a lot. That was really an excellent breakout group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Group 4. I don't see anyone clapping for you, so
yeah, maybe I didn't.
There you go. Everyone is now clapping, Gloria. I think people were, because Byron, can you stop sharing screen so Gloria can see people clapping for her?
Oh, that's
okay. There you go.
Well, nothing like the woman who can't even use her own notes. So thanks for sharing that, Byron. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Gloria, and thank you all for coming today, for sharing your time and your insight with us. Unfortunately, this does bring us to almost the end. I have a couple comments I'd like to make before everyone goes. First, I wanted to, of course, thank you all for being here, for sharing your insights. As I said, the PILC staff is just overwhelmed by the wonderful support that we've been getting with these webinars, and we greatly appreciate you coming. Thank you so much, and for sharing. I also wanted to thank Dr. Patricia Fitzpatrick, as well as Patrick Faulkner, who were integral to our planning of this webinar and gave us some invaluable advice. Thanks to Evan from U of W, who's assisting us with the tech support this evening. And again, thank you all. And thanks to my wonderful co-facilitator, Paula, for all of her hard work in organizing this event as well. For those who do feel comfortable, I would like to take a picture of everyone if possible. So Evan, could I ask you to just do the other view so that I can see everyone? Or maybe that's something that I need to do on my end. There you go.
Yeah, it'll be on yours.
Got it. Okay, so I have to take two pictures because there are two screens. So whoever does not feel comfortable being in a picture, now is your time to turn off your camera. So I'm going in on picture number 1, smile. And now picture number 2 of my second screen. There you go. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Shortly after this event, Paula is going to be sending you an email with an exit survey. We ask everyone to fill out the exit survey, as it'll be really helpful in our strategic planning. A link for this event is also, or a link of this event is also going to be created, so you can rewatch if you'd like. And that's all, folks. So thank you so much, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.